Welcome back to the South African Morning. Now, it's been a week of harrowing testimony at the SA Human Rights Commission investigation into the July unrest. Poor police service and lacklustre leadership from KZN police leadership has been highlighted this week. For more on this, I'm joined by Tseliso Thipanyane from the Human Rights Commission to discuss this week's hearings. And I mean, some devastating testimony came out last week. One in particular, Mr. Mkhize, who accounted of how he and his friends were brutalized by another group of people, and indicating that this was not just violent unrest that happened in Phoenix. There was a racial motivation to violate other people. I mean, your thoughts on that testimony that was revealed this week?
Good morning to you and to your viewers. Certainly, the evidence this week was about the victims, many of them who were victims of racial attacks and killings, which happened during the unrest. But we also had, evidence from the CEOs of the Durban Chamber of Commerce as well as the Pietermaritzburg Chamber of Commerce, also highlighting some of the, their own experiences, but also, their own views about the inadequate policing, which also, contributed to the extensive damage which we saw, during this unrest, where over 300 people were killed and we have lost over 50 billion rands to our economy.
Right. What about this notion that there was an orchestration of the violence that we saw taking place? It wasn't something that came out of just random looting. And of course, that lack of policing that took place having contributed to that well-orchestrated unrest that we saw.
Well, this was actually the view of the CEOs from the two chambers, but also our own assessment, clearly shows, and also from media footages, that this was indeed orchestrated, planned as well. And that's why this coming week we'll be calling the organs of state, the police, intelligence, and everybody else to come and explain, what happened. How did we allow these things to happen like this? Where was law enforcement? Where was intelligence? So we're hoping we'll get answers from the state as far as it's concerned.
Mr. Tseliso, what happens after the hearings? You're going to be hearing about the ineffectiveness of policing and other stakeholders involved, making sure that those lives were not lost. What happens around the issue of accountability when you've heard all this evidence?
Well, our overall objective as a commission in this matter is that, as a body with a mandate to ensure that there is appropriate redress where there has been human rights violations, is that, one, this never happens again, because, this incident really undermined and threatened our democracy, violated human rights in a very extensive manner. But secondly, we need to ensure that those who are responsible for these incidences are brought to book and dealt with accordingly. But thirdly, we need to provide healing and reconciliation in our country, and also try and understand why did many of our people found themselves, being used to act in this manner, which really undermine our democracy, as I was saying. But then also to try and get to the bottom of these things. What are the underlying factors behind this? So we cannot ignore issues of poverty, unemployment as well.
That's very true, and it's going to be very difficult when you're asking for peace and reconciliation, because the truth of the matter is that many of the people that were affected by that violent unrest are the ones that continue to live in poverty and unemployment, and really are denied their basic rights as South Africans on a daily basis.
Yes, that's why, we need to address this and also make sure that, for example, there's a lady in Pietermaritzburg who's still in hospital. She was shot and basically crippled, and people have lost their lives. But on the other side, also, we must take into account that there are also many South Africans who are also victims of this violence, whose properties were looted. We also have to address that. And therefore, the state has to make sure that, the victims are properly attended to, where people have to be compensated, that happens as well. But more importantly, we need to make sure that those who orchestrated these incidences are indeed brought to book. And that's why it's very crucial that, we hear from the state as to what happened and what is being done about these issues. 300 people have died. Billions of property has been lost. Somebody has to account for this.
On a broader scale, do you think that there is a bigger role that can be played by the SA Human Rights Commission in holding government institutions accountable, in ensuring that people's basic rights are met? So beyond the unrest, in a preventative form, is there something more that the Human Rights Commission could be doing to hold state leaders accountable in the provision of rights?
Certainly is, and that's why, we are view that our findings on this matter are binding unless reversed by a court of law, and the state has an obligation in terms of Section 181 of the Constitution to uphold the dignity of the Commission. So basically it means government cannot just ignore findings and recommendations on the matter. Government must act and implement our findings to ensure that this never happens again. That's why we're calling the NPA, intelligence, the police, the two premiers of the provinces, and even the president, if necessary, to attend this and tell us exactly what happened and what they plan to do to make sure that this never happens again. It's one of our biggest tragedies in the last decades of our two decades of our democracy.
Yeah, no, absolutely a big tragedy. And hopefully when we get down to it, there will be those bodies that were involved in the orchestration. They will be held accountable. Many thanks for your time this morning.